What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Homebrew Subaru. In this episode I'm going to do a complete rear brake job on my RS, including the parking brake. What's up everyone? So if you've been following along, I've been doing a brake upgrade on my RS. The front brakes I upgraded to WRX and used some performance pads and rotors. I've got some pads and rotors to do for the back, and the calipers from my old car, which were in pretty good condition. Definitely have some rear brake problems on this car. So at the same time while I'm doing all this, you know, the car has 150,000 kilometers on it. So you know, what is that? Getting close to 100,000 miles. Decided to do the parking brake shoes and all the hardware as well. Probably going to clean up the backing plates as best as I can, and then get everything properly adjusted and reinstalled. I think in the following video, we're going to do a proper auto vlog and go for a good drive in the car and test out the brakes a few times. So it is a little chill out here this morning. I'm going to fire up my heat, get the shop a little bit warmed up, and go and have some breakfast, come back out and get started on this thing. Okay, so because I'm overhauling everything here, I'm just going to go ahead and remove everything that we're changing, and that's including the caliper, the rotor, the shoes in behind, and all the hardware. This hose needs to come off, so I've already put in some penetrating fluid on the clips, make that hose a little bit easier to get out. The line looks like it's in really good shape, and I've noticed all of them are actually in really good shape on this car. So it's 14 millimeter to start with, just taking off the caliper, and then I do believe that the caliper bracket bolts are also 14. They're a little bit more difficult to get at, and you know, to get a long bar in there, but I'm probably going to use the impact. At the same time, I need to reuse this bracket, and as you can see, it's pretty corroded. Like, I'm going to have to spend some time with that thing. Hopefully the sliders aren't seized, but we won't know until we start taking things apart. So let's start doing that. I can just kind of get the pry driver in here and pry the caliper off, because I think this one was seized. I don't know if I can get a... No, I'll probably squeeze it up with some channel locks later. Wow, these pads are roasted. Yeah, so that's don't do that. Not any better. Well, maybe a little bit. So that's what you call getting your money's worth out of some brakes. So yeah, I just can't believe I've been riding on the pad backing for quite some time. I mean, it made noise, but nothing too serious. And I know from like when we inspected this wheel, these pads were done anyway. But yeah, I mean, those are beyond done. That's unsafe brakes right there. Just check these sliders, they're actually moving really nice. So I'll try and get this bracket off next. I really wanted to replace these bolts. Let's just get the bracket off first. Yeah, it's pretty, it's going to take a little work getting that cleaned up. But yeah, the bolts, you can see the heads get quite rotten, and then because you kind of have to use a flex socket to get on them most times, then they start to round off and then they're difficult to get out. So I tried to get these at Subaru, and they kept on telling me the fronts were the same as the rear, and I was like, no, they're not. And after just waiting a week, I was like, okay, I'll just try and reuse them. But at some point maybe I'll order up try and find some stainless ones and replace them eventually. So now that the caliper and bracket are off, next is the rotor. This guy's probably going to be on there. Yeah, feels solid. And the parking brake, make sure the parking brake is off. I might actually have to just beat on this for a little bit and push you guys to the side. And after a few good hits, finally got the thing to come loose. And on the inside, things don't actually look too bad. There's still some lining on the shoes. The spring hardware even looks reusable, but we've got everything to replace it. The backing plate needs to be cleaned up quite a bit. So I'm just gonna probably grab the pan and brake clean this first, get rid of some of this dust. First, we're gonna start with these upper springs, and just using some side cutters, really good grip, don't slip on anything and graze a knuckle. Just kind of pull them over that peg. They are quite a bit of tension to them, so just keep note the rear spring was the first one taken off. You can take this little kind of holding plate down out of the way, and the shoes will start to come apart. Probably get this guy out and just drop the spring off the end of it. So it's got that little spring that goes on the end there, and it kind of sits in there like that. The lever is on the back side, so I usually like to take off the other side first. I've got this tool, I don't know if it's going to work in there. Can't remember if it does. What's going on here is the hardware is actually really rotten on this lower spring. You can see there's not much left of that. Grab this shoe and kind of pull it down, and the adjuster just fell out. Take out this pin. So I'm kind of glad I did get hardware, because this stuff's rotten, and now I can see like this backing plate is in horrible shape. I might actually just take off this outer edge of it to keep it from doing any more damage to anything. It should come off with a little cutting. I'll just grab that adjuster and pull that out of there. And now this other shoe with the lower spring, can kind of just take that off. just kind of left with that. We got our horseshoe clip over here on the other side, so we just got to kind of open that up and get it off, and then this shoe will come off the lever. You get that off. This one's got the little wave washer in behind it, so if there's not one in your new kit, you might want to put that on as well. And then once you have that like that, the shoe will just come off out of the way, and that's what we're left with. So I've got a major cleanup to do here. I'm gonna probably try and get rid of most of this backing plate if I can. I don't know. Yeah, it's coming off. And I got the caliper bracket to clean up, but with the power of editing, and as you can see, with a lot of work, a lot of time spent, I've got the backing plate completely cleaned up as best as I can anyway. So I've trimmed off all the excess thin piece that was heavily rotted, wire brushed everything really down really well. Be careful of your ABS sensor located down here. Sprayed everything with some rust preventative black paint. I've also gone ahead and done the caliper brackets. These were a mess, and I really wish that I considered getting the brackets or calipers with brackets, because I came to realize that the WRX pads are a little bit different mounting than the RS pads, and I've had to do a little bit of trim work here to make these fit, and I know the caliper will mount to them. I don't recommend that, and I am going to eventually have to take these apart and put in the right pads. I think I've got one trimmed a little bit too short, and what's probably going to happen is I'm going to get a little clicking noise on braking. But for now, because the parts store didn't have the right pads, I'm going to have to use these. And maybe in the future, I don't know if this backing plate will actually work with two-pot calipers or not. I think it is actually different. The two-pot caliper might space out a little bit differently, and I'm not sure if there's a conversion kit or something like that. But yeah, if anyone can let me know if the two pots will actually bolt up to this backing plate, and then maybe that'll be future consideration of an upgrade. I know the brakes that I'm putting on the car are going to be sufficient for the power that I'm putting into it eventually, so I'm going to start putting this together and make it all work. So where I'm going to begin is just with the rear shoe. So we want to put the peg up through the hole here, and then I find most times that the wave washer makes it next to near impossible to get this together, and I don't usually put them back on, but I do have a new U-clip, and you can see how snug just the U-clip is. Try and give this a couple taps to get it into place, and once it comes through far enough, you can just grab the ends of it and kind of crimp it together with the side cutters. Once you kind of have it crimped up like that, this shoe is ready to go up into place, and we want to take one of our retaining pins and kind of guide it through the hole in the back, and then make sure it comes through the shoe, which can be a little fight sometimes. And then I'll take the spring with the retaining clip with my other hand, kind of just get it kind of in place, hold it with my thumb, and then grab my special tool and just guide the pin through the clip, give it a 90-degree turn, and that kind of locks it in place. So that shoe's kind of sitting in place, but we're going to leave it a little bit outward so we can get our the little bar that goes in on the top here. We'll work more along on the bottom next. So this kit did come with a full adjuster, and what I like to do here is just the tiniest little bit of anti-seize on the threads here, and then on this little nubby end I usually end up putting a little bit of brake lube, and that'll go in there, and the threads will start right at the edge, and you know that's where this part goes into. So here's the adjuster all together. I've got it wound all the way in. It gets a little tight at the end, but that's not too big of a deal as long as it does turn. I like to have it so that when the wheel's turning upwards, it spreads out. That's the way that they're kind of set at the factory. That way, if you need to do a future adjustment, you know that the wheel just needs to click up to adjust the shoes out. So this guy's pretty much ready to go in. Now this next part is a sequence of little tricks to help you get this together. But we've got the lower spring and the adjuster and the right or the forward shoe in my hand, and I'm going to hook the spring down onto the other shoe as well onto the forward shoe, and I'm going to try and sit the adjuster in place on the rearward shoe, and then just kind of, I know the camera can't really see it, but I'm just going to start the adjuster into the other shoe by prying the shoe into it. And once the spring kind of finds out where it wants to go, the shoe will sit in place, but you must hold it there because the spring will literally pull this down and fire the adjuster out, and then you've got to start over. So while holding that shoe with my left hand, I'll grab the other pin with the right hand and try and figure out where this hole is. And then once you get the pin kind of in place, still holding the shoe with my left hand and on the back side of the pin with my left hand, leaving my right hand free, I can grab the other spring and retainer and just kind of sit that in place. Now I've got one more thing to hold with my left hand. And with a little bit of fighting, sometimes some swearing, you eventually can get it on there. You do want to make sure that the pin is offset on the clip 90 degrees so that it is locked in place, because it is possible to get it just caught on the edge, have it hold together, get everything together and go to use it, and then it pops off. So make sure that you've got that together properly. Leave your shoes spaced out as much as possible at the top. And now we can put in this top retaining bar. Got a new spring to put on the end of it. It should just kind of drop down in here. You'd have to maneuver it a little bit. Get it towards the rear shoe, and then start pulling the rear shoe forward. Line up the front shoe. Kind of help guide it into place as well. And the shoes might get caught a little bit on something, kind of lift them up. There. They're probably still going to try and come apart, but we can start putting on the top springs now. So now we've got this top retaining plate. It just kind of retains the shoes. Got two little ears on the end. They kind of push onto the shoes, and it's got a little shoulder it sits on. If it falls off, you can line it up afterwards. And one of the top springs, it doesn't really matter the order because they're the same tension, same length. They anchor and fasten to the exact same point, so I'm going to start with the front one. Kind of loops into the shoe like that, and then firmly grabbing with some side cutters. Not so tight that we're going to cut it, but you can just kind of pull it up over the anchor. Reposition that retainer. Push the spring onto it a little bit so we got some room for the next spring. I got some tension held on the shoe to kind of hold things together. I'll start this other spring. The same method, just using the side cutters. I tell you, there's a lot more load on those springs than the old ones. And that's basically together. Can give them a little shimmy like this. Try and center them up a little bit. Let's see, that one's trying to pull out, but they should relatively sit where they need to, and the drum will help them, or I mean the rotor will help them line them up. That's the next thing, is putting the rotor on and checking the actual adjustment of the brakes here. The brake rotor. So I've already gone ahead and kind of wiped down the surface of it with some brake clean, and also done the inside of it. It is nice coated surface, and I'm sure the brakes are going to wear on it a little bit. It'll probably create some debris in there that'll need to be washed out eventually, but let's see how it fits. Okay, it goes on nicely, and it spins a little free. So I think we're going to turn the adjuster up a little bit. And sometimes you gotta actually lift the spring to make it a little easier, but I find when they just go back together brand new, I can usually get it to turn by hand. Okay, that was about 4 clicks, and I can already feel it's quite a bit tighter. Maybe one more click. And that feels really good. Okay, so I'm going to leave it right there. Actually, no, I'm going to take it back off. I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on the hub, and then I'm going to put on the wheel spacer and get it all torqued up. Whether you have to do that or not, I have that in another video, but then I'll go right on to putting the caliper bracket on next. So I've got my wheel spacer all torqued up, and I'm ready to install my caliper bracket. I've got to reuse the old bolts because, well, the dealer couldn't get them for me. I'm going to have to try another dealer. So I have a feeling when I replace the pads with the proper ones, I'll have the right bolts at the same time and just do it all at once. So we'll just rest this into place and wind the bolts into it. Now you can tighten those bolts by hand, but you've got to make sure they're good and tight. You'd probably need to step up almost to a 1/2 inch to make sure that you get a good pull on them. So I've got that bolt all cleaned up. The line is installed with some new washers. It's ready to go onto the bracket. I'm going to install the pads first. Now I already have looped up the shims. And you can see my pads do go in place. They stick about 1 millimeter past the rotor, so that's not ideal, but the caliper will go on. And actually this side isn't too bad. They actually retain in place quite well. But for temporary, this is what I've got to do. Yeah, I can go ahead and sit the caliper into place. And I've got some anti-seize on the bolts. The heads of the bolts are all cleaned up. Go ahead and tighten those two up. Next, we want to get rid of our old flex hose so we can install the new stainless line. The clip that's on the strut will not be able to reuse on the line. I don't know if the line it is for a WRX, but I don't think that the strut mounting would be different, but the line will not mount to the strut bracket, so you're just going to have to zip tie it there, but it will fasten up nicely in this body bracket. So after a series of the battery failing in the camera, and then 4 minutes later the SD card full, and then 5 minutes later my light dying, I've finally got things to the point where I'm ready to try and install the flex, or the stainless braided line, and take out this flex hose. I'm going to start by just cracking that steel line. So I've got a 10mm line wrench. And I got it loose, but I'll just keep it a little tight just so it doesn't leak. And I will go about working on getting the clips out. This one is quite rotten, and I'm probably going to completely destroy it getting it out. This one's in pretty good shape, and I have put penetrating fluid to them prior to this, just so they will come out a little bit easier. But because of my lighting situation and the camera not being able to see it in there very well anyway, I'm just going to try and pry them out, and then I'll show you as I go back together with the steel line. The top clip came out good, and I've taken the wire wheel to it. So I'm ready to just pop this line loose again. Now I'll just unthread the fitting. And it's going to drip a tiny bit, but try not to get any dirt to go in there. And then just let the old flex hose kind of drop down out of here. And lay the stainless line basically the way it's going to sit. And just drop it down into the hole. And it's kind of got like a little elbow here, and that'll hold onto the flat side of your stainless nut. And then just slowly, by fingers, thread the fitting in. And if it starts to bind, just back it off and try it again. You don't want to cross thread it. Once you're sure it's threading properly, grab your wrench and tighten it up. Now that's good and tight. All I need to do is put in the top clip. The top clip will work no problem. See, I just pushed it in by hand. So all I'm going to do with this other piece is get the fitting to kind of drop down into the strut where it's supposed to, and then use a zip tie to basically hold it there. And there shouldn't be any real issue of rubbing, although there might be, so you might have to have a look more in the future to make sure that things look good, because I've had stainless lines rub to the steel before, never right through, but they can actually rub on suspension because things are moving a little bit. So that's pretty much it for the install, other than bleeding out the brakes, which I am going to do off camera because it's kind of a one-person job for me. But anyway, I'm going to get this all bled out, wheels on, and then we'll finish up. So here it is a few days later, and I have driven the car every day. The brakes are awesome. They don't make any noise, even with the modified pads. They aren't clicking at all, which I kind of expected them to. So I'm going to probably leave it like this for the winter. I know this video is pretty long, so I'm going to leave this outro short. Gonna plan to do an auto vlog probably the next video or two. I've got another video kind of that I'd like to do. I plan on going for a good drive with the car and doing some really heavy stops to see how good the brakes actually are. And I was kind of hoping that we could get, you know, a little bit of snow so I could see what the braking performance is in snow. So if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below. And I'll see you in the next one.